Yeah, so we are restarting our reading of Sankalpa Kaumudi after a little break. We are reading chapter 21, I think, and we're just beginning chapter 21, which is on page, for those who have the book, it's on page 379. I know Sahachari Mother has the book. Anupa, anyone else? Or if you do have the book, you're welcome to read. You can put your hand up. And so page 379.
We don't have it online, Sadhu?
No,
don't have it online.
It's not available online yet. Normally it takes 2 or 3 years before it might be available online.
Okay.
Yeah, so chapter 21, it's Causes and Nourishment of Sankalpa. And I was just reading through it, the first few pages, and Maharaj is addressing a very important item here. Or Sankalpa can be described as to be determined. What is to actually be determined? So Sankalpa means to make a determination. And Maharaj is going to speak about the actual ingredients of that determination. What makes up the psyche of determination in Krishna consciousness, to attain the different stages of devotion. So Maharaj is going to be speaking about that and help us to understand how we can go forward and how we can be inspired. So Hare Krishna. So let's begin. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastai Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bachaname Nivasisha Sunyavari Pashtatara Satharine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadad Had Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so hopefully some devotees will be joining us. That's one of the expected things that happen, is when we're reading for some time, then we build up some momentum and devotees join each week. But when we lose it for a few weeks, then it might take some momentum for devotees to join us again. But anyway, let's get into it. So Mother Sachari, you can begin reading then from, I think you have a copy, I'm sure you do.
I do,
yeah. So can read a couple of pages, and again, please, if something's not clear or some questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, you can read, Mother.
Chapter 21, Cause and Nourishment of Sankalpa. Like the limbs of bhakti and like the creeper of bhakti itself, sankalpas are generated and cultivated by certain actions and circumstances. In this chapter, we will investigate what causes and nourishes determination. While scripture speaks of many factors that act as a cause of devotion, the foremost are as follows: Vaisnava association, the process of sadhana, transcendental knowledge, the mercy of Vaisnavas, the practitioner's state of mind, successful results of earlier vows, the difficulty of the ultimate goal, and humility. And some of the main factors that nurture sankalpa are knowledge, faith, attachment, humility, and taste arising from bhakti. We shall begin by hearing about the causes of determination. Krishna consciousness begins with saintly association, and from that beginning, the company, wisdom, and the blessings of Vaishnavas remain as essential features of a devotee's spiritual life. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Krishna Bhakti Janma Moolahaya Sadhu Sangha Krishna Prema Janme Tenho Punah Mukhya Anga. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. It would be hard to imagine that a practicing devotee could sustain a resolute determination to progress from one stage to devotion to the next without the encouragement and guidance of Vaisnavas in general, and his spiritual master in particular. The exemplary conduct of other devotees, their subsequent success in spiritual life, and most importantly, Vaishnava's guidance to their dependents and peers are cause for a sadhaka's sankalpa. Rupa Goswami summarizes this by citing a beautiful verse by Sri Autkala. I offer my respectful obeisance to the devotees of the Lord simply by hearing the two syllables Krishna. Their bodily hairs stand up in ecstasy and they are moved to dance in ecstatic bliss. As they dance, they mercifully inspire to devotion the fallen souls sunk in the mire at the bottom of the ocean of birth and death. Like Sadhu Sangha, the process of sadhana bhakti, especially chanting Krishna's holy names and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, so cleanses the heart that a devotee spontaneously feels inspired to make the next step in his spiritual journey. The very nature of bhakti, as attested by the maxim Bhaktya Sanjayata Bhaktya, is to enrich itself. Therefore, sadhana is itself an impetus to meet newer and newer spiritual challenges. If, however, a devotee is careless in devotional practices, he will certainly become stagnant in his progress and lose enthusiasm to attain his goal. Thus, we sometimes hear a devotee say, I am not on those who can go back to Godhead in one lifetime. To such a Vaishnava, we can only reply, such complacency comes from inattentive chanting, neglecting the study of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the over-familiarity with the material energy. If you correct those faults, you will think otherwise. The wisdom of transcendental knowledge obtained through the association of Vaishnavas and from sadhana itself is an essential feature of renewed determination for service. Whenever Gopakumara gained knowledge of higher realms, he became determined to attain them. By the agency of his Gopala mantra, he traveled to places like heaven, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Brahmaloka. Gopakumara's underlying determination was to become Krishna's friend, and according to his evolving knowledge of that goal, his sankalpa took on increased maturity. Common sense dictates that knowledge of a goal is essential in order to generate the determined effort required to get there. And so, it is with Krishna consciousness. For that reason, Lord Krishna proclaims that transcendental knowledge is the greatest treasure of this world. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of mysticism, of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Knowledge affects an increased desire for devotional service within the heart, and that desire is the foundation of progressive sankalpas. For example, by hearing Krishna's pastimes, a devotee is initially inspired to become his servant, then to enter his divine sports, and eventually to adopt a certain relationship with him. Knowledge of the goal is generally accompanied by knowledge of the process of achieving it. For this reason, the science of Abhidaya Gnana has been extensively addressed in the previous chapter.
Okay,
the primary responsibility of a
thank you, Mo. Oh, I think I'm on mute. No, okay. Let's just pause there. Your voice is a bit it's a bit scratchy.
Yeah, there's a crackling noise along
yeah,
with the...
I think, I'm not sure what it could be. It could be the microphone, Mother Sarchari. If you might be too close to the microphone or something like that. But anyway, okay, Hare Krishna. So, any comments or questions on this? Raj is speaking about one of the first aspects in the first paragraph he wrote about the association of devotees, or Vaishnava association is essential. And this sometimes we may not fully really realize or understand or appreciate until we experience not being in association of devotees for some time. Or it depends on your work or your specific situation. You may have strong realization of that if you're often having to associate with non-devotees at work or perhaps extended family members. Then you probably are aware the be kind of aware of the need to associate with devotees and the dangers of associating with non-devotees. I'm just speaking with Nishingarati Babu today, who's staying here with me here, and we're speaking about this point that associating with non-devotees, we may not overly associating with non-devotees, we may not immediately be able to recognize the effects. It comes in very subtly and very slowly. For instance, if you're overly, say the word overly, associating with non-devotees, then you're going to be gradually you're going to take on their values, or their materialistic values may affect you. Of course, unless you're strong in Krishna consciousness, then there's less chance you're going to be affected. Yeah. So, and they take very casually, say, irreligious activities, or they, for instance, the regulative principles. At least as devotees, we're a bit wary, and we're a bit, I don't know if scared is the right word, but we're a bit attentive, and we have to the effects in our spiritual life of not following the regulative principles. But if, for instance, you've developed association with a non-devotee, they don't give a hoot. I mean, the way they speak about following, or the way they speak about engaging in, say, drinking alcohol or illicit sex, for example, or eating meat, for them, it sounds so perfectly normal. There's no hint, there's not even a slight hint of any concern that it's irreligious. Yeah. So you can understand how that may, especially if we're spiritually weak, then that may affect us, and we might start to look in the same way. And then there's danger, because already as conditioned souls, we have, or to one degree or another, some yes and some not, but we may have these memories and some skaras within our subtle body or within our mind. So when we are weak spiritually and we're not associating very much with devotees, and we begin to associate with non-devotees more, then we will take on their values, and we will quite easy for us, and then we will look at irreligious activities as being not so bad, as being okay. Yeah. And that we see devotees come, and then they may, for one reason or another, sometimes it's just by living in a place where one cannot get much association with devotees. Anyway, that's the negative side. But on the positive side, the association with devotees is absolutely essential for reaching and being inspired to attain the different levels of devotional attainment. That's why association generally is always spoken of in the context of associating with more advanced devotees. And I think as a general rule, I think you can see that devotees appreciate this, the power of associating with senior advanced devotees. And we can see that practically when someone like Radhanath Swami Maharaj comes, everyone wants to go to class, everyone wants to, or when he's holding the Shivaram Swami, he's here at the moment. So many people will come to the class, so many people will come to the Kirtan and Indradruma Swami and their respective senior devotees. So many devotees come. Why are they coming? Because they know it's good for their spiritual life. Yeah? It's good for their being. It's good for their being infused in spiritual life, to see it. And you can imagine much the same with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is very, unimaginably exalted, but just by his proximity, just by being in his association, devotees will be inspired and make their own sankalpas in spiritual life to actually advance. Yeah. So Maharaj is I'm just going to turn the light on here. It's a bit dark. Okay, so but I think it's so Marge is highlighting this point in the beginning, associating with devotees. Any questions or comments on that? Or it's also in the Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, isn't it? Rupa Goswami mentions that, the importance of association. Okay, let me just, where we get up to, see what. Yeah, then Raj mentioned speaking about transcendental knowledge, and he's quoting from the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Yeah. So that in itself, Marge mentions knowledge affects an increased desire for devotional service within the heart, and that desire is the foundation for progressive sankalpas. So again, I think we mentioned doesn't mean we have to become scholars, but we should be hearing class online. You could be hearing Prabhupada's lectures, regularly hearing and increased knowledge. Yeah. All right. Anyone else like to read, or if there's any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we have Anupama. Mother, you have your hand raised. You can take us from top of page 382, just under the 4 asterisks. And you can read to the next 4 asterisks. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
The primary responsibility of a spiritual master is to guide his disciple in the techniques of sadhana, which begins with instructions on the meaning of the Mahamantra. Even by mechanically contemplating those meanings, a devotee is empowered to progress in his sadhana. And as he becomes attached to the mantra, his progress becomes more spontaneous. Thus, fidelity to the instructions of the spiritual master is a cause for making a sankalpa. In this regard, Sri Narottama Dasa Thakur writes, "The lotus feet of my spiritual master are the only way by which one can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna." Indeed, so potent is the principle of faith in the instructions of the spiritual master that even though a disciple may not initially have a clear picture of either the goal or the complete sadhana to attain it, by acting out of obligations to Guru, a spiritual path is revealed and his determination to march forward enriched. Gopakumara is a classic example of such a disciple. When first initiated, the boy had no understanding of the purpose of his mantra or how to chant it, but out of respect for the great soul who initiated him, he remained faithful to his sketchy sadhana. As a result, the goal of chanting, the means to attain it, and the determination to do so were all systematically revealed. The marvel of spiritual life, faith in the spiritual master, reaps its rewards in the form of a similar spiritual marvel, the mercy of the spiritual master and the mercy of Vaisnavas. Srila Prabhupada exclusively expressed the meaning of Guru Kripa with the phrase, "Your ever well-wisher." The well-wishes and blessings of the spiritual master ensure that Krishna is quickly responsive to a devotee's spiritual aspirations. A sadhaka meditates daily on this principle during Mangala Arati as he sings. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benedictions of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. The mercy of the spiritual master awakens in the disciple the desire to see Krishna, and the combined appeal of the Guru's mercy and the sadhaka's determinations induces Krishna to eventually reveal himself. This is the wonder of the close adherence to the disciple disciplic succession. Yeah, disciplic. Yeah. And the words of Sanatana Goswami, if by the mercy of Guru and the Vaishnavas, one is eager to see the Supreme Person, nothing can stand in the way of success. While the mercy of Guru and the Vaishnavas may come unexpectedly, without cause or qualification, generally a devotee's state of mind is a governing factor in taking progressive steps in sadhana. As explained in earlier chapters, the origin of the mind is false ego in goodness. And when the mind is ruled by the by the mode of goodness, the resulting sankalpa is conducive to spiritual life. However, if the mind is overcome by passion or ignorance, vows for spiritual advancement are either impeded by sensuality or brought to a standstill by lethargy. To ensure that his consciousness is sheltered by goodness and his spiritual desires unfettered, a devotee must be attentive to his sadhana and must associate it with things in the mode of goodness. Then, as Krishna himself explains, the sadhaka's determination for Krishna consciousness will be spontaneous. When the living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles characterized by devotional service to me become prominent. One can stand in the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are already situated in goodness, and thus religious principles arise. Another significant cause for a devotee to make a sankalpa is the conviction of success that comes from previous successful sankalpas. In other words, from the power of precedent. Having experienced that determined chanting for his mantra transported him to heaven, Gopakumara was convinced that he would meet with the same success if he chanted to attain Mahaloka. He did. The successful result of earlier vows inspired Gopakumara to further determinations, which ultimately found their rest at Krishna's lotus feet. Thus, attainment was the promise of his guru. My dear boy, whatever you desire while chanting your mantra, by its power you will fully achieve. Indeed, you will attain more than you desire. In contrast to a successful president as a cause for making vows, stands the imposing challenge of the goal itself. The rarity and difficulty of perfecting love of God is also cause of vows. The very idea of a challenge is the impetus to meet it, and Srila Prabhupada, like Napoleon, did not consider impossible as part of his life. Napoleon Bonaparte said, "The word impossible is not in my dictionary." Similarly, Srila Prabhupada said, "Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary." While Narad Muni was monitoring Gopakumar's progressive journey to Vaikuntha, he was amazed that a simple cowherd boy could remain so steadfast in his determination for the most difficult and most rare of spiritual attainments. The sage had even warned his disciple, "My dear boy, how is it that you are so eager to take shelter of the lotus feet of this Gopal Deva and see all those sweet pastimes? Dear brother, you must understand that to attain him is exceedingly difficult, especially because of the devotional discipline required. Of this, I'm fully convinced." And yet, Gopakumara was not deterred by the gravity of his undertaking. Instead, he took the final step from Dwarka to Vraj as a challenge that he successfully met due to his strong desire to serve Krishna as a Gopa. While a devotee may sometimes doubt his ability to achieve his goals, the successful either sadhakas like Gopakumara, Narad, and Dhruva will reassure him that sincere efforts are never thwarted. The Mahamantra and Sadhana Bhakti are all powerful, and they gain a sincere devotee, and they grant a sincere devotee his desired goal. Humility is a factor that both causes and nourishes sankalpa. Since the latter is described below and the former is referred to in multiple places throughout this book, we will not elaborate here on how humility is a cause of sankalpa. Of the many factors that bring about determination in the heart of a devotee, we have described but a few prominent ones. The underlying axiom of utility is the principle applies to a devotee's inspiration to meet the challenge of progressive Krishna consciousness. The annexing parallel Rupa Goswami's own statement, somehow or other, one should engage in Krishna consciousness. In other words, the devotee may accept any pure motivation for progress as a valid source for a sankalpa.
Okay, thank you, Mother. Hare Krishna. So Maharaj just kind of quickly summarized these points. He's spoken about Vaishnava association, the process of sadhana, transcendental knowledge, the mercy of Vaishnavas, the practitioner's state of mind, successful results of earlier vows, and the difficulty, I think, yeah, and the difficulty of the ultimate goal. So any questions or comments on this? These points.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yes, please, Mother. I'm just.
My question is, what is the difference between determination and taking a vow?
Yeah. Actually, you could, as I said in the beginning, determinations should manifest, or determinations is the actual manifestation into specific decisions or specific vows. So that's sankalpa. So you say the words are in of the same thing, sankalpa and determination. So that's what a sankalpa is. It's like, it's another word for making a determination. That you make a sankalpa, like before a religious ritual, then the priest may do a sankalpa, for the determined success of the ritual. So they will say, on this day we are doing this specific ritual for this specific purpose, and may it be successful. We're doing on this specific day. You may see sometimes in elaborate homas or fire sacrifices, then the Ritvik or the priest would do a sankalpa. Yeah. So Maharaj is using that. He's expanded that word into this whole book, that one word.
Yes.
And a further look, and it actually means, like, it means a determination. But Maharaj has been very specific, and he's given lots of details, you know, and highlighting the need to have progressive different determinations through different stages in spiritual life. So more or less the answer is, it means the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, sankalpa
Thank
and
you.
determination. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure we've heard, some of you, we may even have this ourselves. We may have heard someone, or we may, where is it here? I am not one of those who can go back to Godhead in one lifetime. Yeah, it's an interesting statement. Of course, naturally devotees they are humble. Maharaj speaks about, or he doesn't elaborate on humility here because it's elaborated in other places. So that may be a statement, some kind of statement of humility. But Maharaj is bringing up an interesting, here he mentions on the page 381, that there is a danger that type of undetermination. So in other words, we have to be determined to attain our goal, despite our qualification. Somehow or another, we want to attain Krishna's mercy. Yeah. But if we conclude that we're not going to go back to Godhead, that means in one sense it's quite subtle. That means we may not be trying to go back. It's impossible. Because what's the point? If you're convinced you're not going to go back to Godhead, yeah, and Prabhupada would encourage you to go back in this lifetime, and Maharaj is actually highlighting that. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to go back to Godhead. So that means that kind of subtly or grossly, in one sense, that means you have decided not to be determined. to go back to Godhead in this lifetime.
That's
Marge
right.
mentions,
Yes.
yeah, it mentions that's complacency. We're
Mhm.
becoming too complacent. And he mentions, as we read, remember we read through, some of you was here for that reading, was we read through the Harinam Chintamani. And this complacency, or the root of all offenses, is inattentive. So inattentive chanting means you're not going to make systematic advancement. So after some time, you're going to be discouraged. If you feel you're not making any progress after 10 or 15 years because of inattentive chanting, you're going to be complacent about the process, you're going to be complacent about spiritual life. And that person may then say, oh, I'm not going to go back to Godhead in this lifetime. Yeah. So the root could be inattentive chanting. Yeah. And then Marge mentions neglecting the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like Maharaj mentioned, I was just thinking whether Maharaj would mention Dhruva Maharaj, because he's the epitome of determination, very stark determination to achieve darshan of the Lord. So if we don't read Srimad Bhagavatam, then we're not going to hear about these great devotees and their success. Yeah. And this one as well, the next Marge mentions here also as over for familiarity with the material energy. Yeah, now that's quite easy to do because the material energy is very powerful and it's very big, and we are very small. And in one sense, we can become quite familiar with being in the material world. We can become quite familiar with old age, birth, and disease. But for a pure soul like Srila Prabhupada, someone saved from the spiritual realm, the material world is full, as described in Bhagavad Gita, it's temporary and it's full of misery. But we become so familiar with the misery that we don't realize it's misery. You understand? We become so familiar with it. Kind of over familiar with the material energy. Maharaj has also mentioned before, when I say the word Maharaj, I'm obviously referring to Shiva Ramswami Maharaj, who's the author of the book. Just let you know that when I say that word. So Maharaj often mentions before, he's mentioned before, which I took note of it. He said that we are fascinated by the material energy. Fascinated by it. The conditioned soul has a fascination with the workings of the material energy. Yeah. Just like if you go to a big fancy shopping center with a fountain and all the and the marble and the lights, and you look at this, you look at that, you're looking at this, you look at that. Or then there's the news as well. You kind of find about the details of the material world and this and that. We have an attraction and a fascination with it. I wish we could have as much fascination or interest in the spiritual world as we do with the war in Ukraine and Russia. So I think we could have as much, we could be much fascination with the spiritual world than we do with the goings on in this material world. So over familiarity with the material energy. Then Maharaj mentions that if you address these points, complacency from inattentive chanting, neglecting the study of Bhagavatam, and over familiarity. So just these three things: complacency, neglect of study, and over familiarity with the material energy. We can perhaps focus on those. Then a determination, an absolute stark determination to obtain the shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, to actually attain a position as Krishna's servant in the spiritual world will actually come. And we do need that to actually go forward. That's why Maharaj is really elaborating on the importance of this. Any further comments on that or questions? And I guess only 3 of us might have the book. I guess perhaps I know. Yeah, Anupama has the book, and another Sahachari and myself. So if anyone else has the book there and you'd like to read, please make yourself known, wave your hands, jump up and down, and let us know you're on read. But I'll continue then. On page, where do we leave off? I've been going backwards and forwards on the pages 382. Okay, so I'll read from there. The primary responsibility, no, we read that, sorry, next one.
386.
386, excuse me. So we shall now describe those factors that nurture sankalpa, such as knowledge, faith, attachment, humility, and tastes arising from bhakti. Devotional service in practice is like building a house, one brick at a time. A mason has determination not only to see the house completed, but he also has a recurrent determination with every brick he puts in place. And there are conditions that make the mason's tiring efforts easier and more fruitful. Similarly, the determination of a sadhaka is enhanced by favorable considerations, just as they are hindered by those unfavorable. Earlier chapters cited Rupa Goswami's assertion that a devotee's advancement in bhakti is measured by his knowledge of faith in and attachment to Krishna. Remember in our Sankalpa, Sudha Bhakti Chintamani, excuse me, got the name from in our regions of Sudha Bhakti Chintamani. Then Maharaj was quoting from Nectar Devotion that according to the quality of our faith and attachment, someone is judged at Kanishta, Madhyam, or Uttam. Yeah? So those with deep knowledge, unshakable knowledge, and deep faith, that is the level Uttam. So they're the most qualified, Uttam, the topmost qualification. Anyway, let's continue. These very factors also nourish the devotee's determination to progress toward the goal. Krishna gives a wonderful analogy in this regard. When a diseased eye is treated with medicinal ointment, it gradually recovers its power to see. Similarly, as a conscious living entity cleanses himself of material contamination by hearing and chanting the pious narrations of my glories, he regains his ability to see me, the absolute truth, in my subtle spiritual form. Now, I just want to see where that's from. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. As the devotee experiences the enchanting tastes and increasing wonders of devotional service, he becomes progressively knowledgeable, faithful, and attached. These spiritual assets give him strength to advance further. To make the transition from one stage of devotion to another, a devotee must know how to enhance his practices and why he should do so. Becoming familiar with the truths of devotion, a practitioner recognizes the importance of progressive sadhana. In the words of Sutta Goswami, Tat Shadadana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pasyanti Atmani Tatmanam Bhakta Shruti Grihitaya. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from Vedanta Shruti. Moreover, by hearing of the excellence and sweetness of Vraj Bhakti, a spontaneous desire for it will eventually arise within a devotee. And that determination will spur him on to his coveted destination. Without knowledge of the great importance of sankalpa and without knowledge of the next stage of advancement, a devotee will hardly be inclined to make the required changes to his sadhana, rejecting and accepting practices as appropriate. Additionally, a devotee must have insight into the mysteries of Nam Sankirtan, his primary means of progress. Such insight comes through the guidance of the spiritual master, and if appropriate, from Krishna within. The following is an example of how knowledge matures in determination. In his early days of Krishna consciousness, an aspirant is encouraged to chant Hare Krishna according to his ability, and not much attention is given to the number or quality of rounds. Just chant Hare Krishna is the maxim. Does anyone remember that when he first was associating with devotees? And it's the first thing we encourage newcomers to do, isn't it? How's it chanting? Are you chanting? That's the question we're asking. And we're asking, so many different questions, but once they get a bead bag, then they're making progress. Okay. They have some level of seriousness. So anyway, but we're not going to tell them much. We'll just say, you just chant. Let's carry on. But in time, an aspirant comes to know that Srila Prabhupada required a minimum of 16 rounds, and that number is mandatory for initiation. Hearing this, the serious aspirant vows to chant the desired number of rounds. Perhaps preceding this vow, but certainly subsequent to it, a devotee realizes that his chanting, what comes next, must be free of the 10 offenses in order to return to Godhead. Knowing this, he makes the next determination to chant offenselessly, a determination he declares publicly at the time of initiation. We make vows, and we hear about the 10 offenses at the time of initiation. In the same way, to reach the stage of Prem Sankirtan and the shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, the mature devotee must be equipped with knowledge and the process leading there. That will empower him to make the requisite commitments. Hearing this, a reader may inquire, what should a devotee know? To answer this, if, in the words of Srimad Bhagavatam, a practitioner attentively and submissively studies Srila Prabhupada's books, he will know everything that needs to be known. Nasta Prayeshu Patrishu. Additionally, if a sadhaka reads the books of our acharyas, his knowledge will be further enhanced. That knowledge includes an understanding of the characteristics of the stages of devotion, the truths of devotional service, and the truths relating to Krishna. Aside from Gyan, a devotee must have Vigyan, realization. A devotee must know how to apply transcendental knowledge to his devotional life. That means he must know what stage of bhakti he is at, how far along that stage has progressed, what the subsequent stage is, and how he must enhance his devotions to qualify for the next stage of sadhana. I always say this is an overriding theme of Maharaj's books, especially Sudha Bhakti Chintamani. I'm sure those who read it, and we read it together, the complete book, this is the whole theme of Sudha Bhakti Chintamani, to identify the different stages, to identify where we are at, and then to subsequently elevate ourselves from one level to another. So Maharaj is bringing up here again.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, yes.
I was just thinking about determination. I mean, every day I renew my determination. Even during the day, I, say, okay, focus, determined, to reach the goal. But this feeling of determination, it doesn't seem very devotional. It seems like I'm like a long distance runner and my determination is on the goal, but it doesn't feel like it's got much devotion in that. I mean, does determination, can we be devotional? Like, I don't know. Determination for me, it seems like, yeah, I need to be determined, but it's not very connected.
Yeah, and I can answer your question. At the moment, we're we're teaching, as some of you might know, we're teaching temple worship module here in London, and there's one question when it comes to the Bhoga offering Bhoga to the Lord. So we asked the question, what is it that the Lord accepts, or why will the Lord accept the offering? So then, what is the answer? Someone can say. Why does the Lord accept the offering of the devotees? Say they're offering some Bhoga.
Because they've offered it with love. I mean, even if they don't have love, but they're offering it with something.
Devotion, yeah. So it's okay. It's not a trick question. It's quite straightforward. Krishna, it's devotion. So the next question we then ask, okay, put your hand up here if you have devotion. So normally devotees, they're hesitant to put up their hand because in their humility, they don't describe any devotion to themselves. So that leaves a kind of quandary. Is Krishna accepting our offering? So, but the point there is that the very fact that they're following the vidhi, they're following the rules, they're actually offering it, they're making an offering to Krishna. Okay, that is an expression of devotion. Yeah, an expression of devotion is not necessarily manifesting feelings of bhava and ecstasy. At later stages, it will be. But just the fact that we are making determinations like Lavangalataka is expressing, she's making these, and which is good, and hopefully we're doing the same thing. Each time we pick up our japa bead, each time we start chanting, there should be a certain level of determination. One, to control our mind, and to control our mind and be attentive. And that in itself is an expression of devotion. So does that help, Lavangalataka?
Yeah, just the act of determination is an act of devotion because you're aiming at Krishna.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good summary.
It doesn't necessarily have to feel like a devotional emotion along with the determination.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, correct. That's a good summary of what I just said, and that's why Marge mentioned in the beginning. Let me just so I can find that quickly. He mentioned this. I mentioned, I might not be able to spot it right away, but we follow the instructions of the Guru. Okay, but we're doing it, and we may not have much realization. So doing it out of vaidhi. Yeah. But we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We have to start somewhere. Yeah. But it's a very good point you brought up. I think Mother Lavangalataka has mentioned a good point that we should be making different. Actually, we do as devotees, devotees are sincere. So even when we're going about our daily affairs, then we're determined. We're determined not to get tempted into the bakery to eat that big cheesecake, which is not being cooked by devotees. No, you understand it? Maybe simple things like that, But we should be making these things on a daily basis, and ultimately, determination should be becoming more and more deep, especially to attain Krishna's lotus feet. There's something from Mother Gaia here. As I understand, determination arises when we understand it is the right thing to do. When devotion is reached, determination is not required. as it becomes natural and spontaneous. Yeah, that's very, very nicely explained. In one sense, it takes on a different form, as Mother Gaia is correctly explaining here. And it's nice the way she's described it. Is determination is still required, yeah, but it takes on a different. It's different. In other words, well, what can I say? Mother Gaia explained it very nicely. It becomes natural and spontaneous. Yeah, it just flows into the loving sentiments and devotion towards Krishna. Just inspires one to render service to Krishna in ever wonderful and increasing ways, and that in itself will cause further determinations. Do you remember that chapter we read, which was very technical? It's called circular causality. Circular causality, where the causes or devotion inspires you to act devotionally. And when you act devotionally, you become inspired to act what? Devotionally. So it's circular,
Yeah.
it just increases. But the depth of, and what's the wonder about spiritual life is that the depth of that experience gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's unlimited because it's a spiritual realm. Here in the material world, everything has its bottom. Everything has an end. Every emotion has a beginning and an end. It can only go so far. It's limited. This material world is limited. So the emotions, or to the extent that you can feel happiness in regards to the body, etc., is very limited. It's like a shallow puddle. But the spiritual world is unlimited. So the experiences of devotion, which describe, I think we read also Sankalpa Kaumudi, I think also, it's like one is lost in an ocean. It's like an ocean, like an eddying ocean. You come up and you go down, all these different emotions, especially the emotions of Vipalamba, separation, and then meeting with Krishna. Yeah, so it takes on a different form. But still we read very wonderfully about the determinations of, for instance, Radharani to actually meet Krishna. Yeah. There's one, sometimes it described how she's practicing to walk in the evening. So what she does is she puts a blindfold on, and she practices walking without any shoes on rocks. And it's always, so she's very determined to go and meet Krishna. But very nicely put, Mother Gaia. It's very nice. Thank you for that. Any other further questions or comments on this point? Yeah, interesting point. Just to remember that what I'm sure to one degree or another, everyone here has experienced Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, why would it be here now? And specifically the different mellows, the different sweetness sometimes of chanting the holy name, or engaging in sankirtan, or associating with devotees, that will get deeper and deeper and deeper if we're progressing nicely and we're not making offenses. Yeah, and it's never ending. It will never end. It will never come to an end. It's unlimited. But in the material world, everything's limited. Everything's temporary. So, okay. Should we read a bit more about this ocean? Yes?
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Now, again, when I start speaking, I forget where I left off. Okay. Yeah, here. Perhaps this vow 388, perhaps preceding this vow, but certainly subsequent to it, a devotee realizes his chanting must be free of 10 offenses. We read that, but no harm reading again. In order to return to Godhead. Knowing this, he makes the next determination to chant without offense. A determination he declares publicly at the time of initiation. I read that, let me go forward a bit. Additionally, the bottom of 388, if a sadhaka reads the books, we read that, okay, let me, okay, top of 389, I found where we left off. The reader may note that while a practitioner's realization matures in tandem with purification of heart, the sadhaka is not excluded from having knowledge of things beyond his level of realization. Interesting sentence, huh? The sadhaka is not excluded from having knowledge of things beyond the level of realization. Yeah. I'm like, why? Well, how can one journey along the path if he cannot see what is ahead of him? Okay. So depending on our level, we're going to see what is just ahead. If we're struggling at the stage of unsteady devotion, nishta bhakti, we're going to be inspired by and we're going to be enlivened by the thoughts of being steady, nishta. That will pull us forward. Yeah. We're not particularly at the stage of unsteady devotional service. We're not going to be revealed the higher realms of bhava and prema and being inspired to obtain that. Well, Krishna can give those realizations, but generally not. You understand? So shanai, step by step. Yeah. How can one journey along his path if he cannot see what is ahead of him? Of course, we do hear about the goal, and we read Krishna book, and we hear and we read about the goal, but we may not really be reading it with a devotional, inspired heart. We're just being dutiful and reading about Krishna's pastimes. But we may not be able to enter into the moods of those pastimes. But still, it's inspiring. Anyway, I'll continue reading. Again, any questions or comments, please feel free to ask or share. Although his disciples were mostly neophytes, Srila Prabhupada translated Krishna book and Chaitanya Charitamrita, both replete with confidential pastimes far beyond contemporary devotees' advancement or understanding. Still, his divine grace thought his followers should know that such pastimes exist. After all, these pastimes are what going back to Godhead means. An endearing example of how Srila Prabhupada sometimes divulged confidential truths is recorded in his biography. That would be Lilamrita. Quote, Kim's sister, who was only 16, also wanted to get initiated. Are there offenses in the spiritual world? She asked Prabhupada at one evening lecture. Prabhupada turned to the audience. See, he said, this little girl, she wants to go back to Godhead. And in the course of the answer, he said, Krishna may kiss you. When he said that, Kim's sister blushed and everyone laughed. That's a very sweet exchange there. Prabhupada's immediately explaining about the intimate, the spiritual world. Unquote. At this point, we shall make a further comment in regard to a devotee knowing about subjects beyond his realization. Because of Srila Prabhupada's ample warnings about practicing bhakti beyond one's attainment, it is routine for devotees to mistakenly call knowing of approved topics beyond one's attainment Sahajism. Yeah. That word may be too quickly used. Or we may, sometimes, I know Maharaj has often addressed this, where sometimes it gets to the extent that if devotees feel any type of devotion, they think they are sahajas. Yeah, they think they're, I must be a sahaja. Okay, it could be a statement of humility. But sometimes we may observe devotees' ecstasies, and we may label them as sahajas. So this is kind of going too far. Although, let me just read on, see what Mori says. Such an unfortunate misunderstanding and its dissemination are serious obstacles to advancement in Krishna consciousness. That said, sahajism exists, and the learned sadhakas should be able to recognize it for what it is. Of the many examples that Srila Prabhupada gave of this wayward devotion, the following is very much to the point. Quote, one must be so eager that without, time's disappeared, let me just finish this here. One must be so eager that without Krishna consciousness, one should become mad. One should become mad. That is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching. Separation, not direct contact. Direct contact is not possible. Neither that is the way of worshipping by the method of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is sahajiya. That is sahajiya hada. I am talking with Krishna. Krishna is snatching my cloth. Unquote. Carry on. There is a book one lady has written. Her experience that Krishna comes, he talks with her and snatches her cloth. She has written openly, but this is not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's way. Okay? All right. It's just gone 7, so perhaps we'll stop there. And let's continue with this next Monday. Interesting topic. Any final questions or comments? Okay, let's pause there then for this week. Thank you for for joining this reading, and let's try and continue next Monday. And next Tuesday, just remind me, I think it's Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? Or Tuesday or tomorrow is Bhagavad
Tomorrow,
Gita.
yeah, Bhagavad Gita,
Yeah.
Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah, Tuesday. Okay, so let's hopefully, I plan to be there for that. So, Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Srila
you.
It was very nice
Hare
reading. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So I'll press the end button and we'll disappear. Hare Krishna.